Yeah, I've been working in design. If I can get my mouse. Working in design for about 4 or 5 years. Before that, I was a social media analyst and a digital strategist. So I've always had, working with whether it be product management or an account executive, always been kind of in a creative field. And so I've always had to work with someone else that's kind of needed to organize what the project may be. And so when I moved into doing product design, working with product management was a pretty easy transition. What I did notice is that whether I've been working in marketing, doing product design, or any type of relationship, you really have to work at it. And so to make anything great, you need to focus on building relationships, and that takes a lot of work. It always takes continuous work. And it's going to be very hard to have, when we talk here, we'll talk about product and design. Here, I'm going to show this is the product person. This person may be really happy about what the project's going to be, and they may think that everything's all right. But how the product person is communicating and all the stuff that they're doing and how that's getting related to design or development. Here I'm going to have this designer being like, she's kind of pissed off. She's like, you may think everything's going great, and it's like in any relationship. You may think the relationship's going great, but it's not, because you're not focusing on that relationship. You're not cultivating that relationship. And so it seems like it's very hard, again, to always be both happy. And so as a designer, sometimes I've felt this, where I think, man, I've just created the best design in the world. And lo and behold, the product person is like, this is so undoable, it's ridiculous. And you've just wasted an entire sprint. So so today I'm going to talk about, how do we improve that relationship. So some topics that I want to talk about is the first one would be expectations versus reality. And so you can think about really any relationship. My wife is here. And Priscilla, you want to wave real quick? That's my wife. So we had expectations going into our marriage, right? And there's very much a different reality of what it means to be married and to work together to do a life together. So I'll talk about expectations versus the actual reality of stuff. In any type of a relationship, you need to over-communicate. I have a degree in journalism from OU, and what I was always taught was say what you're going to say it, and then say what you just said. And so I've used that in design, I use that in meetings, I use that in relationships, that I'd rather someone be annoyed at me for over-communicating than for something to happen because I didn't communicate enough. I'd rather it be a good problem to be annoyed that I've over-communicated something. And then lastly, document. I can't express how vital this is to everything when it comes to doing product development. I think a lot of times I've seen that either the designer or the developer or the product person says really good things, but when you don't document it, it's just in the air. And then you're like, man, what am I supposed to be doing? Where am I at? And so documentation is very huge with a relationship between product and design. So now I'm going to talk about expectations versus reality. And so what I'm going to talk about is from my experience, and I've worked at, again, agencies, in-house product design companies, product design stuff, teams, and so I'm not talking about LegalShield right now. Maybe some I am, but this is going to be what I've experienced, in my full career. I'm saying this because some of my LegalShield workers are here. So what have I experienced? As a designer, my expectation when I work with product is that product knows the big picture. They know the goal, they know the vision, they're bringing emotion into it, they're owning it, they're a product owner, they have feeling with it, there's a huge purpose, and they're the ones so bought into it, and they're the ones spreading that message out to development and design. Reality, they're kind of winging it. Yeah. Another expectations versus reality. From design, I would think the expectation is that product has done the research. That research has been competitor analysis, landscape analysis, and as a designer, I can just sink my teeth into all this information and organize it and build a beautiful product. The reality, they're just doing what the stakeholder or the business owner told them what to do. And so this is something where it's not like a true good relationship, because if product is just being the middleman, then there can't be just a great relationship, right? Because if they're just trying to I should just talk to the business owner, I should just talk to the stakeholder instead of product. So last one here on expectations versus reality. And so, working in product development, having user stories, I would think that I would be getting clear user stories that add up to an epic. The reality is sometimes, again, I'm not talking just about LegalShield, other places, is I've always had people say, hey, design this thing and just make it cool, make it simple, make it intuitive. And people who don't understand design, they're just like, oh yeah, just make it cool. Go look at some other app, kind of copy what that is. Just make it awesome. Just make it, whatever. And I was like, do you realize what other companies like Facebook and Google and Airbnb, do you know the amount of research and all this other stuff and the time that it takes and the true design process that it is? I'm pretty sure we've all seen this image of a glacier. If here's the water line, all the 90%, is it 90% of the glacier is under the water? That's all the research, that's all the hard work, and the making it cool and intuitive and simple stuff. That's just 10%. And so you shouldn't focus on that. You should be focusing on really trying to understand it. So again, talking about a relationship, best thing to do is to over-communicate. And so what I expect and what I want from a product person is to over-communicate with me. I want them to be able to tell me what the overall picture of the company is. If I'm a new person that's just joined the team, and you just throw me in and say, hey, build this data table that does X, Y, and Z, as a designer, us designers, we want to build something beautiful. We want to build something great. We want to make it intuitive. But we need to see the overall picture. We can't build something awesome if we don't know how it fits into the puzzle. And so if I'm working on just one section of an application, I need to know how that's going to relate to everything else so that I can make it fit in. I don't want to design something just to make it look cool. If I know just this one part, I may design it one way, and the pattern is ABC, and that the entire application is 1, 2, 3. That it's like something completely different. And so I expect product to know the overall picture of the company and what they're trying to do. Not only that, again, if I am focusing on just one section, I still need to be over-communicated on what is the goal of the product and service. What is trying to be achieved here? If I'm, if the product is to order a balloon, why are you ordering a balloon? I need to have context in why I'm designing something, so again, that I can make it better. What is the actual goal of it? And so the snags that I've got into is when I'm not being over communicated with, I just kind of have to assume and start making my own guesses. And you don't want that, because you're just going to start having wasted work, because to me, I feel it's the product's job to fill in all the gaps. And as a designer, I should hopefully be asking these questions. If you're not giving me this information, a good designer is asking those questions to make sure that they fill in the gap. Because if they just go on their own, they just start doing like, oh, I just want to do whatever I want. That's not a good designer. A good product designer wants to make sure they are on track with everything else and making sure that it fits in. Another thing that needs to be communicated is what level of product or service is desired. Do you want to have some huge custom experience that it's so awesome, or do you need just something kind of like this out-of-a-box solution where you're just changing the colors or just the fonts? And the reason we need to know this is because it'll let us know kind of what our design process is going to be. Can I just look at something else and copy it? Or is this thing that we're about to design, do we want to be the leaders and be the ones who are innovating in this area? And to do that, you're going to need to go through a lot longer design process. And again, that whole research phase will be a lot longer. So knowing what level of product and service really will let the designer be able to tell you, like, well, if you want that, if you want the custom Lamborghini with all the trimmings on it, and you're like, no, we really just need a Toyota Corolla to get us from point A to point B. We need to know that before we start designing, a custom sunroof and doors that open different ways or something like that. And to go right along with that, if you kind of know what level of product and service is desired, you need to tell us, design, are you willing to allow great design to happen? Another talk that I could do, or that I usually talk about, is what a design process is and all the steps that it takes. So I can't really go into all of that right now, but it's discovery, research, information architecture, prototyping, testing it out, and then iterating on it, and then and sometimes it's cyclical, and you might have to go back to research and go through it again. So as product, and you guys know the timelines, you guys know the overall picture and what needs to be happening. If you want a certain level of a product, service, you need to ask yourself, are you willing to allow great design to happen? Because nothing, what I've experienced is that if you want something great, it's going to take time. It's just going to take time. And I've been in a lot of companies where time is not allowed, and I'm not allowed to do great work. Because, again, with the Glacier, I had to really know and understand if everyone's over here and I want to differentiate us and create a new great experience or innovate, I had to throw all this out of the way. I had to say no and understand everything here and organize it in a different way to be like, hey, here's this new way of doing something. So it takes time to understand how to make something great. Another thing that I need to be over-communicated with is when does it need to be finished? That way I can kind of let you know what deliverables I can give. In product development, usually, most people here, if you guys also work in sprints, just a 2-week interval, hard deadlines really help us out. When you keep pushing stuff to be like, oh, well, we can just push it to the next sprint, we can just push it to the next sprint. To me, I look at that and be like, well, product needs to break down stories and requirements that allow it to get done and finished in a 2-week sprint. And then we really need to over-communicate what the MVP is. Over-communicate what it is and lock it down. Let's keep a backlog of all the cool features. I think new features should come from anywhere. It should come from product, from design, from development, from stakeholders, from business owners. That's great and all, but you really need to know what is the true MVP, because we need to get a product out there and we need to test it and we need to be able to understand it. You need to keep the MVP. Scope creep happens all the time, and it's ridiculous, and it happens everywhere I go. And so I can't fully, as a designer, and even you as product and even development, keep thinking to myself, I can't understand something because you keep adding more stuff to it. So I can't understand what X, Y, and Z is doing while you add 1, 2, and 3, and then you add apples, oranges, and bananas. You know, I can't put all those things together and understand it if you keep adding to it. And so it's like anything. You can be good at a lot of things, or you can be great at one thing. And so you kind of need to be great at whatever it is that your product and service is, and that MVP should be focused on kind of like one thing. Do that one thing, and then start being able to add on to it afterwards. So yeah, I already said this, stop adding to the MVP. Seriously, MVP. I could speak all day on my feelings about MVP. So that's over-communicating. So the best thing that's helped me out in knowing what I'm trying to do, where I'm going, and what's already been done is documentation. We only have so much memory in our heads, and sometimes I've seen this a lot in product development teams. We've gone one way, and all of a sudden, we've veered off so far. And to me, that's always happened because of lack of documentation. And because it's always going to guide you. When I was at OU, we documented like crazy. In front of every meeting document that we had put the company vision or OU's mission at the very top, so that everything that we were doing, we always had that in mind of what the meeting was, what the requirements was, whatever that document was trying to say. We know that we were trying to stay in line with what OU was trying to do. We always had the product, service, and goal right under it. Obviously, we just did a lot of copy and paste, but we had that also. Even if it's just a weekly meeting, even if it's a review or something like that, keeping these two things on top keeps you in line as much as possible, because hopefully you're going to get more buy-in, because that's something that the stakeholders, the business owners, whoever, they're the ones who really, truly believe the vision and the goal of these things. And when you can relate back to it and have it there and say in the document, hey, we're talking about this thing, and you can show how it relates to what the company is really about, you're going to get a lot better buy-in with stakeholders and business owners. Again, you should always document the MVP and then make that document uneditable. And then try to show that, that document as much as possible. But obviously, yeah, just documenting the MVP. A big thing for that's going to help out design is for product to tell us what are all the things what are all the tasks that the application needs to do. Because sometimes we get epics, we get user stories that, yeah, do help out, but a bulleted list of what are all the things, what are all the actions I'm trying to do? Because again, what we're trying to do in product development by building applications is completely different from marketing. In marketing, I'm trying to get you to do something. I'm trying to get you to buy something, to do some type of call of action. And you're trying to stand out. But in product development, it's not that way. Product development, we're trying to sync in with your daily life. That it's so easy for LegalShield, for you to have access to lawyers or to do a will or something, whatever the product service is trying to do. We're trying to blend in as much as possible. That's how it's intuitive. That's how it's a great experience. It was so easy to use. So when we know every task that it is, the designer is going to be able to group the tasks that are more associated, like, oh, obviously these two things go together, you know? And the only thing that we know that is if product really, truly understands everything and truly knows what are all the things that the user needs to do. So a task list is extremely important. I don't see it as like, you know, when you work in Agile, you don't see this as a deliverable. I think it really should be a deliverable. And to me, it's like a mini backlog. It's just, what are the things, you know, as a user, I can do this thing. I need to be able to do this, and this is the reason why. Sitemap, if you don't do sitemaps, you're going to get lost. Meetings, you're going to have meetings over meetings about what it is that we're trying to do, how does this actually fit in. Sitemap is huge, whether it's a website, whether it's an application. A sitemap and being able to scale a sitemap is the best way really for a designer and prod to be on the same page. As a designer, I'm very visual, and by visuals, I mean you need to show me where this fits in. Don't talk to me, don't have meetings over meetings over meetings about it and going over it again. You need to show me where it is. Interviews, hopefully you're doing some type of research, whether product's doing the research or design's doing the research. Documenting the interviews. Whenever I do an interview, I always have one designer leading the interview, and then I have one designer documenting the interview, because you can't do both at the same time. And if you're leading a successful interview, that's another talk about how to do interviews. If you're doing a successful interview, you know, you're trying, for user research, you're trying to find the special something, and so you're asking a lot of questions. You're really trying to dig deep. You're asking why, and you can't really get into the rhythm of an interview and document at the same time. So interviews are huge, and to be able to go back to what a user or a business owner or a stakeholder had to say about something, and so documenting that and being able to go back to that is great for the product person and design. Documenting meetings. This way you're not going to have the same meeting over and over again. Be like, hey, we already talked about this in a meeting, and here it is, and I wrote it down. You know, I probably should do this with my wife and with my boys. Hey, on Wednesday I told you, or Priscilla could tell me, hey, on Wednesday I told you to do the dishes, and I have it written down. So I shouldn't be telling you again. It's right there. Just do it. I could do that about my boys, you know, telling them, hey, you need to clean up your room or whatever it may be. So documenting meetings is a huge, not only time saver, but also you're just not wasting time where you can be doing something else. And again, you're not, the more that you try to keep everything in your head, the further away you're going to go from where you're supposed to be going at. And documenting all these things really helps out. And I know it's hard at first, documenting a meeting. A lot of people don't. I've been at a lot of companies, and a lot of people don't document meetings. But taking the time to invest and get a rhythm of how you document a meeting will truly be beneficial and help your relationship with, again, not just product design, but development also. And so hopefully when you do all these things of understanding the expectations versus reality, you over-communicate, and you start documenting stuff, that's when I think that hopefully product and design can be happy together. That's my presentation. If anyone has any questions, free to take some questions. Yeah. So does this Does the design process follow the same sprint cycle as the normal, right? Usually not. If you're trying to do it the right way, design should be 2 sprints ahead. And not only that, again, like I was saying, great design takes time. And so they should be, in my opinion, I think design should be on their own sprint cycle or whatever, and trying to mix it in and put it all on the same board is not helpful because, again, development should be developing something that's been tested. Like we shouldn't waste the developer's time in developing something if that's going to change. And so that's why the design should really be 2 sprints ahead, minimum. And we did that at OU, and we had really great success with that. Yeah.
After you've got the MVP developed, at what point does the designer leave the project? Like, how long do they need to stay?
So after, and I'm repeating the questions for Twitch. After MVP has been developed, how long does a designer stay on, right? I mean, just it kind of depends on the project, right? Like, if MVP, it depends on product, it depends on the stakeholders, the business owners, is whatever the vision is this something that's truly going to grow? You know, like, and that kind of determines like how your company is going to even structure the teams that you have. I mean, are you going to have teams that come together just to build MVP and then disperse? Are they going to come together and maintain? You know, in product development, the product should never be done, hopefully, because you're testing it out, you're getting the data, and you're analyzing that, and the designer should be looking at that also and being like, oh, this thing that's buried down here that's being used so much, I don't want the user to have to dig to do this because they're using this 90% of the time instead of the thing that's up here up front. And so, you know, it depends on the product, it depends on what you're building, really. Any other questions?